Hello and welcome to the Effects of ITS, the Positive Thinking webinar from Thinking Highways magazine. Hello, my name is Kevin Horace. I'm the editor-in-chief of Thinking Highways magazine based in London. I'm talking to you from London, wherever you may be in the US, judging by the amount of people joining us from America. Hello everybody and good morning to you. It's our afternoon. So we have today a fascinating webinar in prospect, looking at safety, efficiency and customer service and the effects of ITS. Exactly what has happened in the ITS industry, what effect has it had on the world around us, if I may put it in that way. We have four excellent speakers. First of all, we also have, of course, Bob McQueen, my colleague who's based in Florida. Bob will be driving the content. Hello, Bob. You there?
Oh, hi, Kevin. I'm here. Thank you.
Excellent. Good. And also in London, we have Gareth, who is manning the operation side of things and will be asking the questions. Gareth is definitely there because he just nodded at me. Hello, Gareth. Gareth is there. So our four speakers today, we have an excellent panel. We have from Appian Strategic Advisors, we have Armand Ciccarelli. Hi, Armand. Is Armand there?
I'm here.
Hi, Armand. Sorry. We're having a few technical issues, but Armand is there.
There I am. Can you hear me now?
There's Armand. Excellent. Yeah, there we go. Sorry,
Good morning or good afternoon. No problem. Good morning.
It's good. That was kind of Jimi Hendrix style feedback. That was quite spectacular.
That was
anyway,
good.
so if all the listeners, if you ring your ears out now, you should be fine. So Armand Ciccarelli, hello Armand. Armand's been with us on a couple of webinars before, so welcome back to him. We also have a very well-known face and name in the ITS world. We have Dick Mudge. Hi, Dick.
Yep, I'm here.
Dick is there. Hello. Dick is joining us on the phone today. Dick's well known as a mainstay of Delcan's ITS work and also is representing himself today. He's Mudge & Company. So thanks for coming, Dick. And from the Virginia Centre for Transportation, we have Kathy McGee. Hi, Kathy.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. This is Kathy's first Positive Thinking webinar. Hopefully it won't be your last. Hopefully you'll enjoy yourself and get some valuable input from your fellow speakers and, of course, the questions and answers we get at the end. And we also have, from US DOT, please welcome James Pohl. Hi, James.
Hello, Kevin. Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Excellent. So we have a great panel. The guys are going to be speaking. We'll have one person after another, around half an hour, and then we'll have half an hour of questions from you, the audience. So please, you've got a question bar on your control panel. Send us some questions. Otherwise, we're just going to be chatting amongst ourselves at the end, which is normally quite fun. We get a lot out of that. But if you have a question for James or Kathy or Dick or Armand, please send it in, and we'll endeavour to read it out. If there's not enough time to read out your question, all the speakers get all the questions sent to them, and they can answer them individually afterwards. So other than that, if you are listening, I hope you enjoy yourselves. Speakers will turn their phones off so we won't get any interference. I'm now going to hand over to Bob. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. I hope I'm not the source of the interference. The genesis for this particular web conference was in a thought that intelligent transportation systems is a fairly mature business, fairly mature market now, and you would expect in a mature market to be able to answer some fairly simple questions that may be a little hard to actually get answers to. And Kevin mentioned safety, efficiency and customer service. Now there are many performance measures for intelligent transportation systems, but my argument would be that you can boil them all back to safety, efficiency and customer service. So we kind of pose some questions like how much improvement in safety would you expect from an investment in intelligent transportation systems? How much improvement in efficiency would you expect for an investment in advanced traffic management? How many crashes would be avoided because of an investment? How much would I need to invest to deliver a 1% modal shift in favor of public transit? You probably get the idea. How can we answer these direct questions that would enable us to build, for example, a results-driven investment program for intelligent transportation systems? Instead of just taking last year's spending and adding a percentage, or in these days taking off a percentage, how could we actually put together something that would be focused on results? So that was really the context, that was the framework that was set up for the speakers. And rather than take up any more speaker time, I'm going to hand over now to Kathy McGee, and she's going to kick us off by talking about measuring the benefits of intelligent transportation systems. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you. So the great part for me about being on a webinar is that I can completely ignore what he just said, and he can't hurt me. So
hey, I know where you live.
I'm really, really happy and excited to be here this morning and to be a part of this webinar. As you just heard, my name is Kathy McGee, and I work for the Virginia Center for Transportation Innovation and Research, which is the research division of VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation. We have the fortunate experience of being located on the grounds of the University of Virginia, but we're VDOT employees, so we have the best of both worlds in that we get to interact with the academic community, both faculty and students, and really feed off of their energy and enthusiasm, but we also have a clear link to the practical side of things, and we know that there's a pretty high likelihood that whatever we do is headed for implementation. So that keeps us pretty grounded. But I just wanted to point that out so that you know that I'm coming from clearly a DOT perspective this morning. So my next slide. Okay. So I sort of started thinking about this in terms of, where are we and how did we get here? Virginia, like most other states, has gotten to the point where we have a fairly mature ITS program. I will say that we try to call it operations now, recognizing the bigger picture, ITS being the primary tool to get us there, but still a bigger program overall. We have 5 traffic operations centers located across the Commonwealth. 2 of them are fairly typical of what you see in urban areas with pretty dense field deployments of equipment. 2 are more rural in nature with a strong focus on incident management. And the 5th is somewhere in between those others. We recently awarded a fairly large contract, fairly being conservative speak there, to operate and maintain all 5 of those centers and their associated field devices, bringing all of the centers onto a common software platform for the first time. The contract does include a number of performance measures for both system reliability and network performance. So at the very least, we're going to begin to assess benefits from that perspective. We're also in the process of developing and deploying several active traffic management systems. The first of those is on I-66 in the Northern Virginia area. If you're not familiar with that area, it is on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., one of the most congested regions in the country. And the focus of that system is naturally on congestion mitigation. The 2 other systems being planned are in rural areas, and they are being deployed to address some pretty severe weather conditions that are experienced in those areas and their associated safety concerns. And not on this slide, but something we're really, really excited about is our connected vehicle test bed, also on I-66 in Northern Virginia, and 2 parallel arterials. The test bed is equipped with DSRC radios to enable the testing of vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure applications. VDOT is particularly interested in applications that address mobility and safety challenges, as well as applications that will help us to manage our infrastructure more effectively. Next slide, please. The story of how we got here is probably less impressive, but probably not very different from most states. We haven't been probably as thoughtful as we'd like to have been in terms of how we've made ITS investments over the years. It's getting better, I will say, but there are any number of examples of funding investments that were made because the money was available in a particular area, or there was a large construction project which we were able to tie into to deploy technology. Unfortunately, taking that route often put us in the position of being the last thing considered in a very large project and the first thing cut when budgets got tight. And the big results of all of this was that it ended up being a rather piecemeal approach to deployment, which made benefit estimation even if we had tried to do it, next to impossible. Next slide, please. So we know where we are, and we sort of know how we got there. We got there for lots of, we are where we are for lots of good reasons. And the next question I think we need to answer is where do we want to be? And how will we know when we get there? And that brings us back to the topic of today's webinar, just in case you thought I forgot what it was. If we can't express in very clear terms what our vision for operations is and be able to quantify those benefits, and the benefits of the strategies that we think will take us to that vision, the realization of that vision, will never compete well against traditional approaches of new roads, new bridges, new interchanges. Few people question the benefits of more lane miles. Lots of people seem to question the investment in technology. Next slide, please. I'm just going to walk through a couple of examples of where we have attempted to estimate benefits, sometimes after the fact, as in this first example. In Virginia, we call our Freeway Service Patrol a Safety Service Patrol, so SSP is what you'll see in these slides. And this is a good example of what can happen when you aren't prepared to tell your story and to make your case for the value of an operational strategy. In 2003, the department as a whole was facing fairly significant budget issues, and as a result, VDOT cut the funding to SSP programs statewide by about 50%, pretty significant reductions in staffing and resources. They considered it a nice-to-have program, but not a need-to-have program. And although operations staff knew that the program was an important tool in reducing clearance time, and as a result congestion, there was no data to back up that claim. Subsequent to the reductions in staff and resources, data analysis did show significant increases in incident duration with reduced levels of SSP presence on the freeways. Funding was restored to the program, but we realized that it was important to establish, although we had done this data analysis and been able to say, hey, look what you've done by cutting this program, there was no process in place to continue that over the long haul. So a framework was developed that could be used over time on an ongoing basis to measure the return on investment of the program. So we have the data now. We can make statements about what the benefits are, and we can also use the framework to justify expansions of that program. Next slide, please. The TOC in Hampton Roads does a great job. I don't know if any of you have been out and looked at their performance reports. They issue them on a weekly basis and roll them up into an annual report every year. They report on a lot of great metrics. Unfortunately, most of them tend to be internal metrics. So we're looking at device availability, operator activity, great for internal assessments of how we're operating and maintaining what we have, but not necessarily the best metrics for assessing what benefit the system is providing on a mobility or a safety level to the public. So they are tracking incident duration, which is a great start in terms of tying the system to user benefits. And we're now looking at travel time. So that's also beginning to tie that system to benefits. Next slide, please. The last example that I'll share with you on benefit estimation, it involves the I-495 express lanes. They just opened last November, again in the Northern Virginia area. It is new construction, new pavement, always popular in congested areas, but there are managed lanes. If you don't have at least 3 people in your vehicle, you pay a toll to use the lanes. And so the obvious question was, what has the opening of these lanes meant to operations region-wide, or at least in that corridor? What can we say about the performance of the general purpose lanes as a result of the opening of the express lanes? We plan to do a much more detailed analysis of the impacts of these lanes, but for now we've looked at some very basic data on speed and throughput. The graphs you see on this slide do show a general smoothing of the flow in the general purpose lanes. We do see increased speeds and throughput through the express lane corridor on the general purpose lanes. We also wanted to look at the impact to the adjacent arterials, but a common problem occurred and we didn't have sufficient data to be able to do that analysis at this point. Next slide, please. So speaking of data, there are a number of national efforts that some of the other speakers may touch on more than I'm going to, but I think we'll begin to address some of our data challenges. Certainly the safety law requirements in Section 1201 to collect real-time data will, if nothing else, give us more data to work with, as will the requirements in MAP 21 for performance monitoring. Everyone certainly has joined the discussion on performance monitoring now, and I think that's a big step towards being able to clearly express the benefits of operational strategies. All of the SHRP 2 products coming out of particularly the reliability program, but a couple of the capacity projects as well, are giving us some really great tools to look at the data in new and different ways. And so I think all of those things together are taking us the next step towards where we need to be in benefit estimation. Last slide, please. So we know where we are. We know where we want to be, but we're not there yet. We have obviously a mixed record, like most states, I think, when it comes to assessing and particularly documenting the benefits of our operational strategy deployments. We are getting closer. We are posting travel times on our urban interstates. Not only is this great information for motorists, but it also is providing us with some really valuable data that we can track over time for trending purposes. We're looking at some data on more rural roadways to begin to do the same sort of assessments in those areas. We'll continue to invest in operations, and we'll be more diligent about collecting the data we need to not only assess the return on our investment, but also to guide future investments. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Kathy. That was very informative, and it's interesting to contrast in how to justify intelligent transportation systems against asphalt, concrete, and steel projects, which of course have been around a lot longer.
Definitely.
Well, I'm sure we'll get some questions and discussion towards the end of the session, but let's press ahead. Up next, we've got James Paul from the U.S. Department of Transportation, ITS Systems Joint Program Office, and over to you, James.
Good morning. What I'm going to be talking about, it reflects a little bit on what Kathy had to say in terms of how states appear to approach and the deployment of intelligent transportation systems. And it's just a clarification of terms. Adoption has to do with the introduction of technology. So in other words, the first application of a given technology, like information or ramp metering, and then continued deployment of that kind of technology, which really spans the maintenance and evolution of the adopted technology and business practices of an organization, DDOT, or many other state departments of transportation. That's something that I've explored through prior reports in which we looked at a macroeconomic perspective based on survey data from periodic ITS deployment tracking surveys that we conduct throughout the U.S. The last such survey was conducted in 2010, and we reached out to 1,600 public agencies that we identified across the country, including state, local, municipal organizations, and asked them the extent of their ITS deployment. We're conducting our 2013 survey right now. We're looking forward to publishing summary results of that by January of 2014. Next slide, please. In considering the macroeconomic perspective of how agencies approach adoption and deployment, it helps give us a bit of a window into how this will help us in considering how to frame some of the research activities that we conduct at the Department of Transportation here to encourage adoption of connected vehicle environments, as Kathy described in her Northern Virginia case. And migration towards adapting to a connected vehicle environment is complicated and involves a lot of steps in terms of being able to first encourage the innovators and early adopters, but also building the early majority. And as you see on the graph over here, there's a chasm between the early adopters and early majority, in which there are going to be organizations like VDOT, which are really progressive and at the forefront of looking and adopting new technologies to extend the efficiency of their transportation networks. But still, it's important to be able to reach out to those organizations that are further budget limited and that also are more conservative in their approach towards adopting technology, where they really look upon the experience in which described and salient benefits from other organizations can be observed and be translated to their local context. And that's a challenge because, and as everyone may well know, connected vehicle environments are rather new, and implementations of connected vehicle environments are limited. And also they complicate the space a little bit further because it's not solely within the domain of the public agencies, as we've experienced with our current generation of intelligent transportation systems, which are largely infrastructure component based. The evolution of connected vehicle environments now involve public agencies, it involves automotive manufacturers, it involves device manufacturers, and it also involves individual consumers themselves. So working in terms of being able to overcome that kind of chasm, we've already started developing what we call CV, or Connected Vehicle 101 training, which is a new course offering that we rolled out at the ITS America annual meeting in Nashville, Tennessee this past April. And sessions are being scheduled for next week in New Orleans for the Gulf region ITS meeting, as well as other locations around the country over the next several months. Next slide, please. So a recent report that I produced and that was released around springtime this year was one in which we considered what kind of lessons learned can we draw upon the public sector experience for deployment of ITS that will give us insights for being able to establish the connected vehicle environment. Now, I mentioned before there were prior reports that looked at a macroeconomic perspective upon survey result data that we had for ITS deployment tracking. But that gave us really only one dimension, and that was basically after the fact, post-decisional. What we needed to do was to explore the decision process and what kind of factors actually contributed towards being able to, well, what kind of factors contributed to an agency's decision process for being able to move forth with adoption and then subsequent deployment of ITS technology. It doesn't always come down to funding, which is something that most people would readily point to. And the different stars here represent different kind of stages of the planning and also the deployment experience or life cycle itself. So initiation really would be kind of the ideation and potentially the early initial adoption of the technology. The development of the concept would consider how this would be applied as an organizational practice, and then deployment would be, again, further of the adopted technology into the organizational practice. And we were able to stratify 4 broad categories of factors that range on technology or application factors that require consideration of what are demonstrable benefits. So some of these different factors hit upon the decision-making process at different times according to the different agencies. So at initiation, they consider the agency priorities, how much do they need it, as Kathy characterized. Is it something that's nice to have, or is it something that we need to have? Budget and funding sources, of course, always are important. The presence of a local champion in order to be able to focus the attention of the organization is a critical element itself. In terms of moving on to the stage of development, there's a requirement for understanding what kind of compatibility is there for the new adopted technology to work with legacy systems. And again, what are going to be funding and capabilities of being able to procure this kind of new technology to introduce into their organizational practices. And then last, the development stage of the life cycle for adoption and deployment, they consider, again, the quality and reliability of the technology. How mature is it? Has it been effective in practice in other organizations? And then also understanding the potential benefits and risks for that kind of technology in order to be able to sustain the operation and maintenance of that new practice and adopt technology moving forward. Next slide, please. So in the analysis that was done and expressed in the report that was released this spring, there were 5 broad themes that were identified in the public sector and also from other organizations as items to bear in mind as we move forward into a connected vehicle environment. So there is certainly an evolution of ITS decision-making in which organizations are more ready to embrace technology, but rather they are focusing on, well, how are they going to be able to operate and maintain the technology once it's deployed? Do they have the correct kind of personnel? Do the personnel have the appropriate training? Are the job classifications that the organizations, public agencies in this instance, do the job classifications actually match the demands for applying the technology? The role of performance-based management is something that was identified readily from the organizations that we reached out to as an element that can both motivate the implementation of and the adoption of new technology. And this kind of, for those of the participants in this discussion today, our recent authorization law in the United States identified or renewed a new focus on performance-based management as part of the operating objective for both the department and for all agencies that receive federal funding. So this has actually brought impacts upon the state departments of transportation with whom we work continuously for improving the conditions for travel. An element of that performance-based management has to do with being able to convey information about the performance effectiveness of the transportation network to be able to deal with congestion. So there definitely is a lot of feedback that we received from the state departments of transportation and local agencies that we reached out to about the need for getting some better guidance on how to approach technology adoption to suit the needs for performance-based management. As Kathy indicated in her presentation, ITS projects do face competition. It is something that I express as the classic potholes versus ITS model. And the challenge is that a lot of the physical assets of transportation are in the United States are near their end of service life. So the challenge is being able to balance the needs of increasing the effectiveness of the available transportation network while also doing the necessary improvements and infrastructure enhancements to sustain those assets over time. The importance of interoperability and integration was also described as critical in terms of being able to understand how new technology can better interrelate and be interoperable with legacy systems. And so from a region-wide perspective, and region-wide meaning from a metropolitan area in which multiple organizations have domain over the transportation assets for a given area, there's renewed importance for people to develop consensus on what kind of elements need to be considered and better integrated from a data perspective as well as an infrastructure perspective of ITS to ensure that operations can be conveyed across the political borders that may exist within a given metropolitan area. Next slide. This last item expressed some of the leading points that I made right at the introduction of my part of the slide presentations, which is there's uncertainty right now about where public organizations are meant to fit with connected vehicle environments. And but at the same time, there was unanimous expression of enthusiasm for connected vehicle environments. So the challenge there is looking at being able to understand in what ways can we work with organizations that have broad capabilities and capacity, similar to Virginia Department of Transportation, for being able to implement test research sites, as well as working with local and county-based organizations that don't necessarily have the capacity or capabilities for being able to operate with research, but yet are those organizations with whom we ultimately do need to reach because they do have a lot of input in terms of making technology adoption and deployment happen as a continual function over time. So, so it really lands into establishing proper business cases that actually to the different levels of organizations that deliver transportation operations. And so this is something helping to inform the discussion of what kind of research should we be focusing on with respect to the guidance that we convey to large organizations such as Virginia Department of Transportation, as well as local communities such as the city of Orlando, Florida, or Gwinnett County, Georgia, in order to be able to help them find where they need to be positioned and how they could be aligned with establishing connected vehicle environments in the future. So this report's available online, and if you go to the next slide, please. This is available online as other recent reports. If you go to our homepage for the Intelligent Transportation Systems Program at www.its.dot.gov, you'll be able to subscribe for email updates on new procurements and also new documents and public interactions. We produce email outputs roughly once a week or so, so we'll not fill your email inbox unduly. And you know, certainly I would welcome if your questions or comments. You can also interact with me via my email address or by LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. That was excellent. I have to admit, on your second slide, when you had the technology adoption cycle, I was visualizing different agencies and innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards.
I think that's a fair statement to make, and that's not to be punitive to any given organization. It's just it has to be something that we're conscious of, that different agencies have different capabilities and also have very specifically defined roles, and we have to respect that as we consider approaches for adoption.
Yeah, as they say in Silicon Valley, and I think this is a mantra for the laggards, the early bird catches the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, so next up, I believe we have Mr. Mudge from Mudge & Company. Okay, Dick, I won't take up any more of your time. I'll hand over.
You want to go to the next chart? In the words of that famous British transportation analyst, Monty Python, now for something completely different. If you go to the next chart, if you measure the effect of ITS, the classic way to do this is a benefit cost analysis, and this is done by piece by piece. This course is useful, but there are three problems. Number one, this is rarely done. Delcan just finished a project for Federal Highways where we're measuring the impact on congestion of active traffic management, and we can only find 70 or so valid before and after studies in the U.S. Second problem is this assumes a linear world, and that's a simplifying assumption. Third problem is there's kind of a built-in bias. We rarely study failed projects. I can count on one finger the number of benefit-cost ratios I've seen below 1. Now, if you look at history, and we want to see what the large-scale impacts are, there are three key factors, and I list them here. First, you need to look at things from a network point of view, either regional or national. Second, you need to have a financial plan, and I think a credible plan to make sure you get things done on time. And second, of course, there has to be a real market there. This is not to say these other things work if you have a bad, you're doing something poorly. Now, the classic examples of this are quite a few in the U.S. The Interstate Highway System is the one that's been looked at the most. This generated annual rates of return of 50 to 60% a year over a couple of decades. One of the advantages of the Interstate Highway System was that there were no PhD economists involved in its design, because if you look at benefit cost analysis, we would have only built 1/3 of it. If you go to the next chart, let me talk a little bit more about ITS. ITS has been built piece by piece. And over the last 25 years, there's been no real effort at synergy. Now, some of the ICM work that's being done in Dallas and San Diego start to change that. There's been no true national program, and it's certainly true in the U.S. I remember in the late 1990s, the then DOT secretary said, ITS will reduce congestion by 15% in the next 10 years. But there's no program behind it. There's no funding behind it. There's no real commitment to doing it as a program. And at the same time, ITS provides real tangible value. All the stuff I've looked at has been positive. The economic returns are good. We've just missed a lot of opportunities because we haven't done it in terms of scale. And I think the world of ITS is nearing its completion. If you look to the future, I think the leadership in transportation technology is changing. It's going to be taken over by the private sector, and by this I mean the true private sector. That is not ITS consulting firms. Everybody is talking about automated and semi-automated vehicles. Certainly, connected vehicles fall into this. These are coming from the vehicle manufacturing side of the business. Semi-automated vehicles are already out there right now. Fully automated vehicles could be here 2017 if you believe Google, 2020 if you believe Nissan and GM. And this deployment passes each of the tests I mentioned before for transformational success. First of all, they're going to be done on a national scale. Second, the funding's there because it's going to be driven by the market. And third, they certainly meet public and private demands for safety as well as good transportation systems. And I happen to believe that these things offer the potential for effects that are well beyond the scale of what's happened in the past. There'll be positive impacts for transportation, that's obvious, but there should be positive impacts for the economy and society. When you think about economy, these things have the opportunity to generate productivity gains, something that is vital for general competition, for international competition. And I think these gains could be greater than what you saw with the interstate highway system. But when you look at the effect of these things, the traditional approaches do not work. In conclusion, I look forward to the 20th year reunion of this panel when we can discuss about how the effect of this new set of transportation technology is quite different. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. That was very interesting. It's I guess we're getting a lot of a theme about connected vehicles. I'd be interested in the panel's opinion on when we might see fairly large-scale introduction of automated vehicles into the marketplace.
Well, my immediate reaction is that in certain ways we already have a connected vehicle environment. It depends on what you accept as the definition of connected vehicles. I think that for many, the perception is that it is solely limited to information that is generated from vehicles to other vehicles through dedicated short-range communications at the 5.9 gigahertz band. But that may not necessarily be so. I think that my personal belief, and certainly something that was expressed in our strategic plan for ITS research for 2010 through 2014, is a connected vehicle environment is one in which connectivity is established through any available media. So for those who are involved in creating data about the state of transportation operations on an individual basis, they're actually contributing to the enhancement of operation.
Mm-hmm. So
I think James is right. A lot of this stuff is out there already.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, the Radius has vehicles that operate at under 25 miles an hour in an automated fashion. An awful lot of the cars have things that are commercial technology, so it's already started.
Yep. So does that mean that if I'm driving a connected vehicle and my vehicle automatically connects up with the guy next to me with his iPhone, that I'm able to express my opinion of his driving abilities?
Do you have to have an iPhone to communicate? I thought
I suppose hand signals are very effective as well. Wonderful. Okay, up next we have Armand Ciccarelli, and I'd like to hand over to Armand. There you go.
Thanks, Bob. So I'm Armand Ciccarelli with Appian Strategic Advisors. You can go to the next slide. So there's been really some great work done, and a lot of it's been discussed today, both by, folks at the JPO, folks in Europe, in Asia, to assemble data, lessons learned, a lot of other case study information, and a lot of things about the effects of ITS deployments. And it's highly useful information, and I'm sure, James, you can talk about it even more. When I get through, I'll be quick through my materials here and like to talk about this a little bit. But to me, the next logical question is, how do we leverage this to really enhance agencies' ITS investment programs? And the reason I ask this is because, despite having these resources, it seems that at least some transportation agencies seem to still be unable to answer some of the questions or the types of questions that, at least I think should be answerable at this stage in maturity of the ITS industry. And so like Bob's questions he posed at the beginning of, if I invest X million dollars in an ITS system, how many dollars can I expect to receive in return in terms of, multimodal safety, efficiency, reliability, or even customer service? Or another question could be, how many dollars and in what areas would we have to invest in advanced transit management systems to stimulate, for example, maybe a 5% modal shift. So to me at least, and this is the question I want to pose, and I'd like to talk about this and maybe get some feedback from everybody else in the panel and questions from people who are out on the call, is, it seems to me at least that just having the ITS specs data and making it available may not be sufficient to answering these questions. And so that leads me to ask, what would be the value of having a tool that supports basic ITS investment decision making? And the reason I ask this, and this goes back to just what we were talking about connected vehicles, is this could be the perfect time to take a close look at our ability to assess the effects of ITS. In addition to data that's already been collected, and there's a lot of it, we see all these new data sources emerging, new sensors, new types of sensors. There's a variety of probe data types. There's connected vehicle data. And so we're entering this period of real data richness. And during this period, I think that the effects of ITS investment can be even better assessed by the tools that make use of these data sources in new ways that we may not even be thinking about right now. Can you go to the next slide? So it seems to me that the underlying goal should be to initiate a project that's aimed at developing what we could refer to as something like an ITS effects tool. And a tool like this could build on the programs, the analytics tools, and the data that's already in place both here and in Asia and the Pacific and in Europe, and provide a practical, some kind of user interface and analytics platform to enable agencies to actually find answers to the questions like were posed at the beginning of this presentation. And to me, the ultimate result would be not to just be having the data and evaluating performance measures and answering questions like are being posed as part of MAP 21, but to enable enhanced investment decision making based on that real world data. And so that's answering the types of questions and how to budget what to spend in ITS and what to achieve what results. So there's actually questions on both ends. What should my budget be? What should I be investing in? What will the result be? But then as well as that, I think we also need to talk about ways to come up with common standards for actually assessing, doing evaluations. If we've got 5 different agencies and they're conducting assessments in 5 different ways, as part of this, I think we need to think about ways to come up with some standards to make sure that data is being collected and being evaluated in the same way, so that we've got a baseline for both before and after to work with that everybody can rely on, being very similar from no matter where it comes from. And so, to me at least, this effort involves both the use of an inference engine and kind of large database management technologies that'll have to take that data and configure it, enable it to be mined in order to answer those questions that people have about where and how they should be investing in ITS. And at least for me, the outcome of the project or this effort would be a practical information delivery and visualization tool to support more optimized ITS investment programming, planning and programming that is. So that's decision making with regard to anticipated impacts versus costs, and even then being able to better prioritize those proposed projects. And as part of that also, having this information, generally providing the basis for justifying investments in ITS systems. As we've talked about, money's becoming scarcer and scarcer, but actually having, this kind of a tool to actually could potentially help justify, some of the investments that we really think are necessary and vital. And so, given a lot of the focus on the implementation of performance-based management, both in MAP 21 and other places, I think that the development of an ITS-oriented decision support platform represents a real opportunity to provide users with a type of tool to more proactively optimize system performance. So I'm going to close with just one question, and the question I'd like to put forward is that, both technically and politically, what needs to happen in order for this tool to be created, and not just be created, but for it to be developed in such a way that it provides maximum value to the widest array of users possible. Not just, we've got to really think about who the stakeholders are, and if this tool gets develop it so that it helps out as many of them as possible. Because as we have to recognize, different agencies are going to have different needs, and they're going to have different techniques for making decisions, and we need to take that into consideration. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Armand. we're opening the floor to questions right now, but I believe that Gareth is having some sort of technology problem. So,
that's right.
There will now be the sound of tap dancing, I guess.
Yes, unfortunately I don't appear to be able to access the questions that are coming through. I'm happy to blame Kevin because he's probably put the jinx on the technology, but yes, unfortunately I can't.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. Yep. Hereafter known as the Boris effect. Yeah.
That's right, that's the one.
So,
I'm the new butterfly, I'll go for it, yeah.
but
I mean, we do have, I mean, I'm sure that you panelists can ask each other questions. Bobby,
oh, yeah, I have questions. Picking up on something that Armand said there just now about the To Decide project in Europe, a couple of the main players there were a Finnish Transportation Research Institute and I think some people from the Austrian side of Europe, and they actually discovered that the problem they had in Europe was that when it came to the evaluation of ITS projects, they were comparing apples with oranges. They couldn't get common ground between the evaluation data that was collected in different projects. And what I'd like to ask the panelists is, do you think we have the same situation in the US?
You seem to have a problem with the dog.
I think they have a major problem in the U.S.
Sorry about that. That's the office security system.
Can I point out that was not anything to do with our dog?
Yeah. But did you notice the sound quality got better?
Very clear, wouldn't it? Go on, then. I think Richard answered the question.
I think there are two major problems in the U.S. One is just the lack of well-done studies. But the other thing, and Armand's presentation hinted at this, if you want to, you really need to have a baseline. And if you have a benefit-cost ratio of 3-to-1 or 5-to-1, what are you comparing it to? What's the benefit-cost ratio for the other things we'll be spending money on? Adding a new lane, adding a mass transit line. I think there's much less data on the baseline of the other things we spend money on. So I don't know whether a ratio of 3-to-1 is good or 5-to-1 is good. Maybe you're building mass transit and it's got 8-to-1. So there is no baseline to compare these things against.
Yeah, I was kind of interested. Seoul Metropolitan Government a few years ago decided they would cut 1 mile from the expansion of their metro, their underground rail project, and I think that freed up something like $1 billion that could be spent on other things. So I think the challenge to us is absolutely showing that there's a relative value in ITS compared to some of these other juggernauts that are moving.
Mm-hmm. I will say that we've attempted on a couple of occasions to do that kind of trade-off analysis where we model. Obviously, we didn't build the lane, so we can't measure, but we do model the impacts of adding a lane versus managing the existing facility more effectively through ITS. And when you factor in cost, particularly where right-of-way is needed, ITS comes out tremendously favorable in that comparison, or at least in delaying the need for that facility expansion. And I think that's where we don't do a good enough job saying, we may not eliminate the need, but we can at least postpone the need until we're more prepared to do that expansion the right way.
Yeah, I was kind of interested a couple of years ago that the environmental lobby seemed to be becoming very negative about advanced traffic signal control. The argument was that if you make things better along a corridor, then drivers experience better travel times, and then people appear on the road that were staying off the road because of congestion. So it's this suppressed demand issue. Of course, that's a very simplistic way of looking at signal control, in that signal control doesn't necessarily need to lead to higher speeds. It can be smoother journeys. But
I think about the point you're raising, I think there's a fundamental flaw in a lot of the analysis that's done. A lot of the world believes that induced demand is bad, and induced demand to me is more people completing useful trips. It's a positive thing.
Right. So what you're telling me, the congestion is just a side effect of economic well-being?
Absolutely. In other words, if you want to get rid of congestion, just it's at bad economic times.
Yeah, well, I think you've just experienced that around about 2008, right?
Yes.
Cool. What about the apples and oranges question? Do you think we need to do more to make sure that we're comparing oranges with oranges?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, again, we just finished a project, as I said, for federal highways, where you looked at existing before and after studies, and they're not done on a consistent basis. They don't measure the same types of impacts. It's very hard to compare them.
Yeah.
I think the quality of data we have has gotten much better. If you look at probe data that's out there, there's more consistent data. If we're things, we need to be doing before and after studies, impact studies, on some kind of consistent basis. And we just don't do that. I think there's a natural role for U.S. DOT to help change that.
Wonderful.
Can I ask a question, actually? I just thought, if we're talking about evaluating the benefit of ITS, what role in that, do you think, or bigger role could IBEC play? Because that's what they do. They evaluate benefits and costs.
I mean, as one of the founders of IBEC, I'm glad you mentioned that. IBEC has a major role here in terms of communicating the best techniques around the world.
Yeah.
I don't think they've actually focused on coming up with guidelines for how to do it. That might be an interesting role for them.
Here's the question: what were they?
So there's an intriguing snippet.
What on earth was that? I quite like these interlopers, dogs and
Absolutely. Yeah.
toy robots.
I think Dick kind of conjured all this up with his reference to Monty Python.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe it's a special function of GoToWebinar that if there's a silence, then some extraneous clip is introduced.
Monty Python, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
This
Well,
is dead.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to get into obscure British comedy, then the answer to all this, the answer is 42.
Ah, yes.
I'll go with that.
Okay.
I mean, I think
that's it. Then. So the answer to all our questions is in that case is 42. That's perfect. We could have done that all along. So sorry, listeners, if you expected to listen to the benefits of ITS and what the effects of ITS were, you've missed out. You just know that we all have read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy at some point. So you've learned something, if nothing else. So that's excellent. So good job we couldn't read the questions. So I'm sure some of them aren't going to be able to complimentary. In that case, go James.
I was just going to circle back to comparing apples to apples and oranges and dolphins and upset Earth-sized computers. So the challenge is that benefit cost ratios as they're developed are highly sensitive to markets. So, for instance, while the question came up, I quickly Googled, or rather I should say searched the popular search device mechanism, benefit cost ratio. Benefit cost ratio of a highway mile, and through that there are a smattering of outputs from a number of states. One will say 1.2 per highway, benefit cost ratio of 1.2. Another state says 1.4. There's one from some county that indicates a benefit cost ratio of 3.7. So there's a lot of price sensitivity depending on the specific highway improvement that's being made, or the transportation infrastructure improvement that has to be made. The challenge in everything that we're doing with encouraging further ITS deployment, including migration to a connected vehicle environment, is that it has to take into consideration the aging infrastructure we do have in America. Because if the infrastructure asset fails completely, there's no amount of ITS that you can throw at it. ITS will not lift a bridge that collapses, and we've had the unfortunate challenge of having to face that in Minnesota and Minneapolis with the I-30 bridge collapse, and more recently with the I-5 bridge collapse in Washington State. However, that specific bridge collapse could have been prevented through ITS because that was a truck striking the physical asset itself. So in that particular instance, if there was some amount of proved data sharing that would convey to the truck operator that clearance would be a little bit too low for that truck, and to provide a diversion route away from that physical feature, perhaps Washington State wouldn't have had to face the challenge of a partial bridge collapse. And how do you value that versus something else? Because not every state, not every locality is going to experience or anticipates a large vehicle striking a bridge or an overpass. And economic models really are not sufficient or don't necessarily deliver the precision of doing either or after analysis. I mean, I suppose you could through some kind of modeling, but that has to be guided through different types of techniques. Now, one of the things that we're doing here at the department in terms of improving the better comparison of oranges to oranges is further promoting the practice of logic models, and Wikipedia, by the way, has a fascinating and very good definition for what logic models do. So the 50-cent term logic model is that it helps express the existing conditions, what kind of remediations you can actually attempt, what kind of immediate outputs or consequences could be achieved, and then you can extrapolate any outcomes. So as a walkthrough of an experience, for instance, I'm crossing the street and I get hit by a car. I could go to a bad hospital. So if I go to a good hospital, I could go to a good hospital that has a good doctor or a bad doctor. So if I happen to go to a good doctor, well, then I'm able to continue with my, career and, and maybe one day become executive director of the Federal Highway Administration. Not that that's my career aspirations, but
that's not a good doctor. That's a great doctor.
That's a fantastic doctor, But I go to the good doctor, but he treats me or she treats me badly, and I end up, walking. In an affected way, and that causes some kind of depressive mood or something like that, and my career aspirations plummet, or my career stays the same. I mean, you have to consider the different potential outcomes that may be achieved through the different types of deployment. So we provide transportation systems in order to be able to deliver people safely and effectively and efficiently for the lowest possible public cost and also end user cost. And so it's a matter of weighing the constant trade-offs one way or another. So in order to be able to establish some kind of process rigor to be able to consider all of the potential outcomes, a logic model needs to be developed or crafted that considers in this instance, a research deployment to better understand and better extract the benefits that could be attained. And by having that kind of logical approach, it would encourage other organizations to look at that kind of logic model and see if those kinds of outcomes would be similar to the outcomes that different agency would interpret or see outcomes that would align with the mission and purposes for that other organization. So not to pick on a little bit more, a lot of what VDOT is doing is something that's going to be relevant for encouraging other states that maybe can similar types of deployments like Pennsylvania or Indiana, and they would need to understand, the basis or the genesis of why VDOT elected to make the deployment that they did. So that way they would be able to see whether or not within the context of their own business practices they would approach it the same way or not.
Because I'm really convincing, that's why they did it.
Of course you are. You have me convinced.
Yeah. Hey, sales and marketing is important here.
That's right.
I think you're making a good point, James, about the need to balance objectives. I remember having a discussion with a client about how we could make the road the safest in the world, and the solution was quite simple: close it to traffic.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We've got a question.
Absolutely.
We've got a
You have a question?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do have a question. One has managed to filter its way through to me. I don't know what's happened to the rest, but we do have one question. I know we're slightly over time, if the panelists can just stay with us a little bit longer. The question is this: in connection with the benefit element, are there any recent studies on the value of the information itself? That is, the value of being informed, even if there's no possibility of changing behaviour. For example, the route, the time, etc.
There are some. Ooh, sorry about that. There are some studies, and I can't quote them, but I probably could find them for you, that looked at sort of driver satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and they found that there's value in just knowing why you're stuck, even if you can't do anything about it. Knowing why you're trapped in that queue does something to alleviate your frustration, even if you are truly stuck and can't get out of the queue. Like I said, I can't tell you what the name of the study is or even who did it off the top of my head, but I could find that if the questioner is interested.
Okay.
So the question is, would Coca-Cola be prepared to sponsor an ad that said this jam is brought to you by Pepsi?
Yes. It'd be better if this jam is brought to you by Hartley's.
Oh dear. That would be that would be Smuckers over here.
Oh, okay. I've never eaten Smuckers, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, I haven't. I'm diabetic. Jam is not my favourite. I avoid that kind of thing. It's probably the pectin, but we've actually reached the because if we do go over time, we do get shut down after about 67 minutes. So we are in danger of losing it. So I'm afraid we have to draw a line under that excellent positive thinking. So thank you all very much for your time. Thank you to Armand Ciccarelli and Kathy McGee and Dick Mudge and to James Pohl. Thanks to Bob for driving it. Thanks to Gareth for fielding the questions but not being able to read them out, which is rather unfortunate. Anything we do get, of course, instead of questions, we do send them to the speakers and they can answer you afterwards. The next positive thinking is going to be in October, but of course, you subscribe to our Thinking Highways email broadcast. You'll find out exactly when and where that's going to be. Well, it's going to be where you are. Obviously, it's a webinar. I'll cross that one off, but you'll find out when it's going to be. But it's going to be about social media and ITS. We've got some very interesting speakers. We've got Andy Palamasamy from Citizant, and we've got some people from universities in Israel and Leeds in the UK discussing the effects of social media in ITS. So thank you all for taking part. Thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, Kevin.